up? Tyler, plugged on. It's the end of the year. 2017 is coming to a close, and it's time to do the top albums of the year once again. There's a lot of things up on the channel now. We did movies, games, TV. Keith has his album of the year up. We did top songs. Now you gotta go through me. If you want to get to 2018, start all over again, you gotta go through me, man. 2017, it was a challenging year outside of the world of entertainment, in my opinion. I think there was a tremendous amount of great stuff from this year, from music to movies to TV, everything. It was great, and there's definitely some quality albums on my list of what made it. This is my personal list, of course. I would love to know what yours is, but these are the 20 albums that hit me this year, for sure. So without further ado, let's get started. At number 20, Iced Earth with Incorruptible. Iced Earth, I mean, they've been trucking along for a long time now, and I feel with this album they delivered something, that I like a lot. And to me, you have Dystopia from a few years ago, the first record they did with Stu Block, and then you had The Plagues of Babylon. Those are two kind of polar opposite albums for Iced Earth. One is straightforward in your face, the other one is very epic. And I feel Incorruptible kind of mashes the two together in a pretty balanced way. It's an album that I honestly think has some of the best Iced Earth tracks on there, like Black Flag, Raven Wings. The instrumental Ghost Dance is one of my favorite instrumentals ever, and there's some quality stuff on here, and John Schaefer just kills it in the riff department, as always. Number 19, Body Count, Bloodlust. Honestly, I did not expect this album to make it, honestly, but I loved this album when it came out, and then I was revisiting albums, that came out earlier in the year, and I'm like, yeah, Body Count with Bloodlust is an extremely strong album, and the thing that I love about it is just, I feel its songwriting is on a whole nother level, especially compared to their previous album, Manslaughter, I believe. Ice-T sounds fantastic, but, I love the lyrics to this album. I just love the raw feeling in the very real nature of the songs and the issues that are talked about in these tracks. And there's some fantastic songs. You have This Is Why We Ride, which is one of my favorites. Of All Love Is Lost, which has Max Cavalera on it, which is good. My favorite, which is the title track, Bloodlust, but then you have Black Hoodie, No Lives Matter. There's just song after song. Every song is quality, with some solid guest appearances as well, and overall it's an extremely strong album. Number 18, I have Communic with Where Echoes Gather. I love Communic. I think they're one of the most underrated bands of all time, period. They're a progressive metal band, but they're totally different, in my opinion. They are built around riffs and memorable moments, and boy, are there a lot of memorable moments on here. Just between the two-parter opening track, The Pulse of the Earth, there's a lot of just moments that just blow me away, and then you get to the title track, which has a great vocal hook to it. Then you get the Moon Dance, which is one of my favorite tracks of the year, one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. There's a lot of just quality writing all over the place on here, and it's one of the strongest Communic albums, in my opinion. Number 17, Mors Principium Est with Embers of a Dying Sun. These guys, they're a melodic death metal band, and honestly, this is probably, just looking at my list, yeah, this is my favorite melodic death metal album that I've heard all year. There's just quality stuff all over the place. You have Reclaim the Sun, which is just an absolute monster of a track with a very great verse riff, with some very catchy vocals thrown on top of it, and one of the just most wonderful choruses I've heard all year. I love how everything's just kind of going back and forth, and the rhythm's doing something in the lead, and the vocals are on top of it with just a great hook. It's a great track, and there's some other ones on here that just rip, like In Torment, The Colors of the Cosmos, of just some of the best melodic death metal riffage that you'll hear ever. And then you have one of my favorite tracks, potentially my favorite track on here. It's always a tie between Reclaim the Sun and Death is the Beginning. Death is the Beginning is a slower song, but it's very catchy, and I love the atmosphere of the whole thing, especially the middle section. When, you know, everything breaks and it's just this beautiful, somber sort of mood going on, then they just bring in this rhythm that's just simple and crushing. I love it. Number 16, an album that, honestly, kind of like with Body Count, I didn't think was going to make my list, but revisiting it, I'm like, man, this is honestly a strong album, and it clicked with me even more than when I reviewed it earlier in the year, and that's Fit for an Autopsy with The Great Collapse. This is a damn fine deathcore album, and Fit for an Autopsy, you know, I love their first album, and then their second and third albums, when they changed singers and all that, you know, I think those albums are good. They have some tracks on them, but this is the album where I feel they have just clicked in, or firing on all cylinders, and Joe on vocals, it just completely annihilates this album and just brings so much life to it. But then there's just monster riffs all over the place. Iron Moon is the track that stands out to me. Terraform is another really strong one. Spiral, the final one, and just crushing breakdowns and just quality songwriting all over the place. It's not about the breakdowns on here, it's about the songwriting, and that's when I think, you know, deathcore can still really shine, you know, even with having some breakdowns and more simple guitar and everything. When they focus on the songwriting and not just being heavy, they can pull something off that's special, and this is one of them. Number 15, Exhumed with Death Revenge. Man, Exhumed, you know, it's been a little while since we've gotten a new Exhumed record, and I haven't listened to Exhumed recently for a while now, and I love their previous album, so when this came out, I was like, there's a new Exhumed album, and I was excited, but it completely went above my expectations. I love the feeling of this album, just this dark cemetery sort of feeling. I don't know, I love it. And in Exhumed, just, they deliver such quality stuff, especially recently, and it all comes down to the riffs. The riffs on here are just tight, and there's so much variety in here. Like, they're a more traditional death metal band, you could say, but they bring in so many different styles sometimes. You know, there's riffs on here that sound straight up like something you would hear on like a speed metal record. There's something on here, you know, the track Nightwork, I believe, sounds straight up like Slayer. But then you have just some very heavy stuff, and it's all about the riffs. But also on top of it, Matt Harvey delivers just another gross and wonderful vocal performance, and I love how they constantly go back and forth on vocals and layer on top of each other. It sounds fantastic, and this is a quality album. I love it. Number 14, it was my most anticipated album going into the year. I wasn't fully sure if it was going to happen just because of the track record of this band, but I have The Forest Seasons by Winter Sun. I think this is a good album by Winter Sun. It's not my favorite Winter Sun album, and honestly, it's probably, out of the 3 records they have, it's probably the weakest one. But what I like about this one is it's different. It has a good style to it, and they genuinely try some different things for Winter Sun. This album kind of sacrifices riffs for atmosphere, and sometimes it really, really works. I love the opening 2 tracks, Awaken from the Dark Slumber and The Forest That Weeps. They have some just fantastic moments on them, you know, in some of my favorite Winter Sun moments ever, especially The Forest That Weeps about halfway through the song. Just an incredible riff and lead and all that. It's phenomenal. And a lot of the drumming on here it just has a lot of power to it. You know, in those 2 tracks, just kind of some simple, straightforward beats that really drive the song along. But then you have Eternal Darkness that is such a dark track for Winter Sun, and it's just kind of the hardest one to get into, but once it clicks with you, you understand that how great it is. And then you have Loneliness, the final track, which I think is one of the most beautiful things that they have written, and really showcases Yari's vocal abilities. And And I think he sounds fantastic on here. Not only there's some moments with his ground vocals where I'm like, man, he's killing it on this album. But then when it comes to Loneliness, I think he sounds fantastic with his cleans as well. It's a good album, for sure. Number 13, the new album from The Contortionists with Clairvoyant. This album is just incredible. And, I think Language is a great album from these guys too. And this album just continues the Contortionists, in my opinion, their ascent of being one of the best progressive metal bands out there. And something kind of different and unique. They're really carving their own path. And I just love how they can write something that feels almost kind of radio friendly, like reimagined, but still just feel so wonderful. But then they can write bigger things like Monochrome, or one of my favorites, Return to Earth. There's some just beautiful stuff on here, and Mike Lezard just continues to evolve as a vocalist, and these guys have such a bright future, and I just love listening to Contortion. When this album came out, I really enjoyed it, but how I usually kind of define some of this stuff is how much did I keep coming back to it throughout the year. And this is one album that I did come back to and just found myself listening to a lot. Number 12 is an album, it's maybe a little bit of a cheat, I don't know. Not really a full album, it's more of a double EP, but it's something different for me. And it's a band that's definitely gaining a lot of attention. That's Greta Van Fleet with From the Fires. I think this album is fucking incredible. These guys, they sound very much like Led Zeppelin. There's a lot of influence there, but I still think that they're on their own path and they will create something special and just take that influence of Led Zeppelin and just create something of their own. And I'm not a big classic rock guy, but these songs just fucking dug their claws into me when they released, and I just listened to this album nonstop, and it still just puts a smile on my face to listen to it. You have Safari Song and Edge of Darkness, which I think showcase just some fantastic guitar work there. And then you have, of course, Highway Tune, which just has a fucking amazing riff that is one of the catchiest riffs I've heard in a long time. Then you have another really fun track, Talk on the Street, which is more upbeat, and Black Smoke Rising, which is a little bit more epic and has a great chorus and really showcases Josh's vocal abilities. And there's some great stuff on here. And sometimes, listening to some of these guitar riffs, the way they're played is just has so much style and just love to it. And I love it. This band, they're going to go places, man, for sure. Number 11, Mastodon with Emperor of Sand. I love this album, and honestly, I think this is one of their best albums in a long time. It's better than The Hunter, it's better than Once More Around the Sun, and I know Mastodon is finding a lot more commercial success with this album, being on radio and all that stuff, than they have in the past, but there's good reasons. Some of these songs are just, they are fantastic, and I think, Show Yourself is a very short, simple song for Mastodon, but it's one of the more catchy ones they have. It's definitely not my favorite on this album. I kind of look to the middle section of this album is my favorite, with tracks like Steam Breather, which has a fucking awesome riff to open it up. Roots Remain, which has some beautiful, incredibly catchy moments in it. Words to the Wise is another good one. Same with Ancient Kingdom. Ancient Kingdom is another one that I think vocally just is really strong, and I think from start to finish, this album has a lot of great material on it, and it's an album that I think from start to finish is much stronger than some of their more recent efforts. Is it their best album? Absolutely not. But is it one of their best? I think so, for sure. It's an album that I found myself listening to all the time, and when I want to listen to Mastodon, I kind of have been going to this one more than any of their other ones. And then number 10, this one won Surprise of the Year for me. It's a band that I've enjoyed a lot. They have many albums, but this is honestly one of the best. I just did not anticipate it being as good as it is, and that's Cradle of Filth with Crypt Orianna, The Seductiveness of Decay. This album is just pure gold from start to finish, and it has so many just incredible riffs and incredible vocal moments and incredible choruses, and they just put everything together where I feel, Hammer of the Witches was a good album too. This one I think is just taking it to a whole nother level, where I feel with some of their past albums, they've had some hit or miss moments of just some really strong ones, and then just moments of just pure boredom to me. But not with this album. Like, there's just riffs that make you just want to jump up and down. I take the seductiveness of Decay, which is something I feel sounds different for Cradle of Filth. But then you have, Heartbreak and Science, the second track, that has one of my favorite Cradle of Filth choruses. I love the guitar lead there. Then you have Achingly Beautiful, which is one of my favorite tracks on here vocally. Danny Filth sounds good. And there's just so many just incredible moments on this album that you kind of have to just take it all in and really experience it by itself. It's a treat to listen to, for sure. With number 9, I have a band that, we reviewed earlier in the year. We've talked about a decent amount on the channel, but probably not too many know. They're a smaller band. They're a little bit more local to us, but, it's an album that really just hit me a lot this year, and that's Mind Maze with Resolve. Mind Maze, they're kind of like a progressive metal band. They have power metal influences and all kinds of stuff. A lot of Iron Maiden influence and stuff. And this is the album that, if I had to say, when you reviewed it to now, how do you, is there a difference in what you feel? And this is the album that I just feel I completely had wrong when I reviewed it. I was a little bit more down on it when I reviewed it. This album has completely clicked with me and is obviously one of my favorites of the year, being in my top 10. Sarah Teets and Jeff Teets are a fantastic duo on this album. And Jeff honestly writes some of my favorite guitar solos I've heard in a long time. I take Sign of Life as an example of that. But then there's just incredible riffs all over the place. It just, you can tell, draw from many different influences and just create something special. I think this is the best album for Sarah in terms of vocals. She sounds incredible throughout the whole thing. Sign of Life is one of my favorite tracks of the year, and its straightforwardness, but also heaviness and beauty is fantastic. When that fucking song opens and that guitar lead is playing, it's like, yeah, you just want to fucking air guitar the whole thing. It's great. But there's a lot of other really good ones on here. Twisted Dreams, one of my favorite. True Reflection, fucking Abandon is another really great one. It's overall just a wonderful album to listen to. Number 8, talk about kind of a comeback in my opinion. Trivium with Sin in the Sentence. This is one of my, this is, the best Trivium album since In Waves, probably. And it might even, I could totally see the argument of it being better than In Waves. Check out our ranking of all the Trivium albums. But to me, what I love about this album is that Trivium got back to being a little bit more of who they were. Vengeance Falls, Silence in the Snow has some quality tracks on it, but they were becoming a little bit something different and trying some new things, and that's all good. But this album gets back to the heaviness. It gets back to the aggression of Trivium, with the title track, Beyond Oblivion. I love coming out of that first chorus when Matt Heafy's just screaming Beyond Oblivion, fucking drums are blasting everywhere, and that riff is just killer. Hearing that track, I was like, yeah, this album's going to be pretty damn good. But then you have, Thrown Into the Fire, I think, is one of the heaviest songs that they've put together. But there are some of the, more friendly tracks on here, like The Heart From Your Hate. But even then, the hooks in that song, the rhythm to open it up, it's just great. And overall, I was getting a little worried with Silence in the Snow. We've said many times on here that we don't really like that album. And I was just getting a little worried about the direction of Trivium, because that's the first album where I'm like, I just don't want to listen to this anymore. sort of thing with Trivium, and I've never really felt that. So I was getting a little worried, but not with this album, for sure. Number 7, another comeback, in my opinion, Warbringer with Woe from the Vanquished. This album is just one of the most aggressive thrash albums that I've heard in a long time that I love. I think there's another album later that I'm going to talk about that is a little bit better, but you know, Warbringers, they kind of they fell off a little bit, and they had a lot of lineup changes and all that stuff, but to come back with something this strong and this quality is you know, kudos to them. Silhouettes, the title track, and Remain Violent, and Shellfire. Just those 4 songs in a row just completely kill. And John Cavill just sounds so pissed off. He's one of my favorite thrash vocalists. When, you know, he can, you know, kind of mold with the band in just the intensity of it and take it to a whole nother level. Silhouettes is a good example of that. Same with Remain Violent and Shellfire. You know, when they are all really, really hitting on all cylinders, they create magic. And, you know, Spectral Asylum is another great track that I feel is a little bit different for Warbringer. It's a little bit slower of a song and heavier, a little bit more mood to it. I like that stuff. And you know, they delivered a little bit more of a straightforward Warbringer album, more akin to their older stuff, but nothing's wrong with that in my opinion, and I am very much hoping that they can turn around another album a little bit quicker than they did this one. Because, man, I just want more Warbringer. Number 6, Creator with Gods of Violence. It was a pretty solid year for thrash metal, and I think it was more of a solid year for younger thrash bands, but Creator delivered a follow-up to Phantom Antichrist that is almost as good as Phantom Antichrist. Like, it just misses the mark in my opinion. The only difference is that I think Phantom Antichrist is pretty perfect from start to finish, whereas this one falls off a little bit towards the end in my opinion. But man, those first, just looking at it, 7 tracks are just killer, and some of the best Creator stuff that they've done. You know, World War Now, Totalitarian Terror, Army of Storms are some of the more aggressive tracks on here that I think really stand out well and really work for Creator, especially Totalitarian Terror. I love just the heaviness and the pissed off nature of that song. But then you have the title track, Gods of Violence. I love its acoustic guitar intro, but then it gets into these just creative and weird riffs that are so Creator. And it's just fantastic. And Miley Petroza just sounds killer throughout this whole album. This band still has a lot of life in them, in my opinion. They might be older, they've been around for a long time now, but man, when they're delivering some of the best material that they've ever written with this album and Phantom Antichrist, I mean, hey, they could just go forever. Fuck it. Why not? At number 5, it's the only album that I don't own, and to be honest with you, I don't know why I never picked this one up. And it's a little bit different of an album for me. And that's Steven Wilson with his new album, To the Bone. So this album is a little bit more poppy and a little bit more kind of sing-along sort of feel to it than other Steven Wilson albums, and it's definitely different than, you know, say, Porcupine Tree. But Steven Wilson, he's kind of just a genius songwriter, and this album is just one of the catchiest albums that I listened to all year. And it's an album that I think just has so much beauty in it that it doesn't matter if it's something that's different. You know, Permeating is one of my favorite tracks of the year, and it's a track that I honestly showed almost everyone in my family and said, listen to this. What do you think? And they're like, this is really good. I like that. You know, that sort of stuff is great. But then you have, you know, the same Asylum as before, which I love. You know, the vocals in that chorus. It's just so beautiful and organic sounding. But then you have Pariah, which is another just beautiful track where the lyrics just have a lot of just great meaning and is an uplifting song the whole time. Then you have the opening track and the title track, To the Bone, which I think is just really good and has a lot of good energy to it. But it's just, from start to finish, I just think there's so much just quality stuff on here. And Steven Wilson he sounds fantastic on here. It's creative and it's just fun to listen to, but also just delivers some very powerful and meaningful moments throughout the whole thing. I love it. Number 4, Enslaved with E. I love Enslaved. Their last album, In Times, was good, but it definitely wasn't an album from Enslaved that I come back to a lot recently. But this album, I just think, delivers some of the best stuff that they've ever done. And, you have those first 3 tracks, Storm Sun, The River's Mouth, and Sacred Horse, are killer. And what I love about this album is just Enslaved continuing to just do completely different stuff and push people to think of, like, well, what is an Enslaved album? What can an Enslaved album be? And that's awesome. And I love that. And to me, when Enslaved puts everything together like that and really stretches their wings, they can create moments of just complete beauty and wonder. And I love it. And Storm Sun is one of my favorite songs of the year. I love how that still kind of puts together things that I love with Enslaved, while also pushing them to do something different. It has those traditional, just fun, kind of bouncy Enslaved riffs that I love, but then some of the more aggressive Enslaved riffs are still there. Still has some great ground vocals, but then it gets to just this ending that is just fucking killer, with just this big chorus sounding thing that just blows me away every time I hear it. Same with Sacred Horse, gets into some very weird stuff towards the end. It's fantastic, and I love Enslaved, and I love how, kind of like with Creator, they're still just delivering quality stuff this late in their career, and that's awesome. And the thing with Enslaved is, like, you listen to their early stuff to where they are now, and it's wild, the journey that they've been on. It really is. Alright, man. Top 3. Here we go. What 3 albums just captured me the most this year? And they're 3 completely different albums. That's what I love about them. Number 3, Unleash the Archers with Apex. This is by a million miles the best album from Unleash the Archers. And there is literally not a bad track on here. It just delivers pure, fantastic heavy metal bliss, and I love it. Brittany Hayes just completely evolved as a vocalist on this album. The whole band completely evolved. Their whole sound. I mean, you listen to their early stuff, and there's some great stuff there, but the guitar just sounds a little thin, and the whole production just sounds a little thin. Then you listen to this album, and I just take Cleanse the Bloodlines for an example of just like, bam, like, fucking here we are. Brittany has this just soaring, powerful vocals over top of just a meaty fucking rhythm, and it's like, this band has never sounded better. And those 2 things take this whole band and this whole album to another level. But then they just deliver just incredible songwriting and incredible riffs all over the place. The Coward's Way is one of my favorite examples. The False Walls, Apex. There's a lot of just great leads on here in fantastic moments. And I love it. This is an album that I constantly kept coming back to this year just because of the quality of any of these songs. They're fantastic heavy metal songs. It's great. You go into every year knowing the albums and the bands that you like, and you know that they're recording albums, they've announced albums, whatever, blah blah blah, and you're like, I'm looking forward to that. And some of those albums do really hit well. And then there's some of those bands that you discover in that year, and they click with you, and they deliver some of your favorite albums of all time. Those are some of the moments that I really love from every year. You take my album of the year from last year, Fate's Warning. I never really listened to Fate's Warning before, but they put out a new album. I checked it out. I completely fell in love with it, and it's an incredible album. For number 2, for a long time, this was my album of the year. Something else changed later on, obviously, but number 2, I have Royal Thunder with their album Wick. Well, this album is a complete masterpiece to me, and I am just so in love with this band's style and sound on this album in particular. Melanie Parsons just is one of my favorite vocalists, period, coming off of this album. She has so much power and soul in her voice. And this band just delivers such an atmospheric record that just fucking rocks your face off. And at times just has this very grungy feel, and at times has this nice classic rock feel, and then at other times it sounds like something completely different. The 2 tracks that stand out to me on here, opening up, 3 tracks, opening up with Burning Tree followed by April Showers. April Showers is just a fucking killer song that I think showcases everything this band has to offer. But then you have We Slipped, which is a much more happier sounding song, delivering just a punch of a fucking chorus. The title track is fantastic on this. Towards the end, The Well is another super great song. There's just so many just perfect moments on here that just stuck with me literally the entire year. I probably listened to something from this album nearly once a week. And it's an album that also kind of came to me at a very special and important moment in my life that I will always have when I listen to this album, it will always have an affiliation with that moment. And it just, maybe that's something that raises it up a little bit, but I still think it is just an incredibly powerful album, and I very much look forward to what's next for this band. So number 1, my 2017 album of the year, the album that just, I think this album is fucking perfect, damn near perfect. And it's an album that grew on me a little bit. I loved it when it came out, but where it is now, to me, just is a whole nother level. That is Nightmare Logic by Power Trip. Now, this album has been taking home a lot of been on a lot of, end of the year lists, best songs of the year, and it fucking deserves it. It was about a few months ago where I was revisiting this album, and I'm like, wow. Like, it just clicked with me even that much more, where I just kind of went, this is my album of the year. Even a few months ago, I fucking knew this was it. And this is such a special album. Does this completely reinvent the thrash metal genre? No, but this is one of the most perfect examples of what it can be. The thing about Power Trip is how they have so little and they do so much with it. You take the track, in my opinion, the one that really exemplifies that is Executioner's Tax. That song is the most popular song on here, but just take that song as an example for a second. That main riff is fucking simple as shit. It's just open palm muting and just some simple bends and all that stuff. But then, the drum beat behind it, Riley's vocals on top of it. Every time I listen to that song, I go, this is so simple. But it is so fucking crushing. It just makes me want to jump in the pit, man. It just makes me want to headbang. It gets me so pumped up. My favorite track of the year is Crucifixation, which is the final one on here. And that song just delivers just something of just beauty. It is so fucking crushing, the opening of that song. When the whole band, it has this just very kind of thrashy, goofy sort of riff. And then the whole band busts in and BAM! It is one of the fucking most crushing things you will hear ever in thrash metal. Then you put Riley's vocals on top of that, and it just takes it to a whole nother level of just intensity and insanity. And you have the middle part of that song, which I think is really good. And, you know, every time I hear Pure American Hypocrisy, and then they pick up the beat, it's like, fucking God, it's indescribable what this album makes me feel every time I listen to it. Nightmare Logic is another good one. Fucking all of them are a good song. This is just 8 songs of pure thrash enjoyment and some of the best stuff you will hear, some of the greatest riffs I've ever heard. And that's the beauty of them. They're so simple most of the time. They're nothing complicated. They're just straightforward, and they put the most perfect drum beat. It's just like, these guys just get it, man. They do, and this band is going to a whole nother level. They've been on some massive tours. They're getting a ton of exposure here at the end of the year with some of this stuff. But they truly have delivered a complete masterpiece with this album. It's only their second album, and I go, well, what's next, man? Because if you deliver this, you know, can you keep it up? I really think there's a lot of potential there. They could, for sure. Power Trip with Nightmare Logic. That is my album of the year for 2017. Thank you for watching everything from this year. Really appreciate it. Let us know your top albums of 2017. See you around.